Hey, what's going on? Ryan Knowlton here. We're going to debut a show, what's going to be a weekly show called The Outsiders. The Outsiders is going to deal with underrated and marginalized rock stars, jazz musicians that maybe didn't quite get the breaks that they could have to become huge mainstream stars. And we'll try to shed some light on their career and why they are great. And our first episode is going to deal with founding member and bass player Phil Lynott of Thin Lizzy. He founds the band in 1970, takes them through a series of great albums all the way until 1983. And Philip was born in Birmingham, England. His mother was a white woman who could not find work in Dublin, so she goes to Birmingham. She ends up meeting a man in the Air Force who was black at a dance. They date a little bit. She gets pregnant. Upon the Air Force finding out that Phil's father is dating a white woman, they send him to London. She's alone. She has a baby. Upon Phil's birth, the nurses treat her terribly upon finding out that Phil's black. There's racism in this part of Birmingham and in Ireland at this time. It's terrible. They can't find a place to live because she has a black baby. She ends up going to the butcher shop and asking the butcher for bones for her dog so that she can take those bones and boil it down into a stew for Phil and her to eat. Upon not being able to raise him properly, she sends him to Dublin to be raised by her mother. Phil grows up in the 50s, is one of the only black people in the neighborhood. Okay, Phil uses this prejudice to rise above that. Okay, Phil's a complex person. Phil has insecurities, but he's also confident. He gets into music. He loves Elvis. He gets a band together called the Black Eagles, and here's a picture with him and his mother, Philomena. This band does cover tunes of the time. He ends up getting together with a band called Skid Row that features a young Gary Moore in the band. Phil's the lead singer of this band. This band's kind of a progressive rock band, and Phil's not playing an instrument. Upon Phil having a bout with tonsillitis, they fire him. Okay? Phil is without a band. Phil decides to learn how to play bass. He gets a friend to teach him how to play bass in about 6 weeks and forms a band called Orphanage, at which point he's asked by a guy named Eric Bell if they want to start a band. Phil decides that Orphanage has gone the distance, and they form a band, and they name it Thin Lizzy. They end up meeting the manager of Slade, Chaz Chandler, who's also associated with Jimi Hendrix. Hendrix, at this point in the late 60s, is Phil's idol. He's also black. He's also in the UK. Even though he's an American, Hendrix got his start really in the UK. Thin Lizzy does a couple good records, but it's really not till that third record that they have a B-side single called Whiskey in a Jar. Whiskey in the Jar becomes a hit. Okay, they go on a show called The Top of the Pops, which is the biggest show in the UK. It's the equivalent of the Ed Sullivan Show, and they've kind of made it. Okay, but by this time, Eric Bell has drug problems, alcohol problems. The whole band's partying. Phil's able to captivate a crowd with shapes. He calls a move like that throwing shapes. A move like this, throwing shapes at a crowd. He's a confident singer. Bell leaves the band. Gary Moore from Skid Row. Okay, Skid Row's kicked him out, but Gary Moore does come and tour a little bit with Lizzy in 72, 73 period, at which point he leaves. So he's had 2 guitar players leave him. At this point, he reaches out to Brian Robertson and Scott Gorman, and they decide to have 2 guitars. In case one of them leaves, at least they'll have 1 guitar player left. And this really kind of signifies the prime of their career. They do an album called Fighting in 1975. In fact, they put out 3 studio albums in 75. They put out Fighting. They put out Jailbreak. Okay, Jailbreak's got Cowboy Song on it. Has the song Jailbreak, has The Boys Are Back in Town, which ends up being a hit in the United States. They put out my favorite Lizzie album, Johnny the Fox. Listen to this record sometime. You know, they go over to the United States. They're big in Europe. They're a big band at this point by 1975. They have the 2 guitar attack. Think about the harmony guitars on the solo of Boys Are Back in Town. And Boys Are Back in Town is not really a great example of how great this band is. They're heavy. The song Emerald, the song Borderline, which Metallica covered 2 nights ago. And of course, Metallica's covered 10 years ago or so, Whiskey in a Jar, which is an old Irish folk song. You know, Phil loves his nationalism of Ireland. He's a devout Catholic. And he does have a love for women. Women are just glued to him. And he has his problem with drugs and alcohol. After those 3 albums in 75, they do a fantastic live album called Live and Dangerous, which is one of the best live albums in rock history. On a U.S. tour in 76, Phil, after a couple shows, has to cancel the tour because he comes down with hepatitis. They go back. Did they miss their chance to really follow up on the Boys and Back in Town and conquer America, which is every English rock star's dream, is to conquer America. You know, they go back, and then Brian Robertson, the guitar player, at 4:00 in the morning, gets in a fight and gets hit in the hand and has a glass bottle go through his hand. On the night before they leave for the United States again, they have to cancel another tour. Okay, Gary Moore comes and helps out on that tour a few weeks later when they do go and make up some of those dates. But again, they've had 2 consecutive U.S. tours that have been canceled. And really due to partying. You know, Phil's run down. You know, finally they kick out Brian Robertson, and Gary Moore does come aboard, and they do a fantastic album called Black Rose. Black Rose is, you finally have Gary Moore on for an album. It's an amazing, amazing record. They, after Gary Moore leaves, they pick up Snowy White, okay, for the album Chinatown, and an album called Renegade. These are great records, okay. The last record that they would do is an album called Thunder and Lightning with John Sykes. Sykes has left the band Tigers of Pantang, and he joins Lizzie. And this is almost like a heavy metal album. In the meantime, Lynott's done a couple solo records. He's gotten married. He's had 2 daughters. He had a side project with 2 guys from Sex Pistols, Paul Cook and Steve Jones. Johnny Thunders. He did a single with Johnny Thunders from the New York Dolls. You know, Phil is a celebrity in Ireland. He's a celebrity in Europe. You know, Bono from U2 idolized him. Bob Geldof from the Boomtown Rats idolized him. You know, they end up breaking up in 83. You know, his wife leaves him because now the drug of choice has moved to heroin. You know, his father left him. His mother had to leave him with the grandmother. Skid Row kicked him out. Eric Bell left him. He can't get along with Brian Robinson. Gary Moore leaves him 3 times. His wife leaves him. And his life gets darker and darker, you know. In 85, he's not asked to do Live Aid. You know, even Ozzy Osbourne got back together with Sabbath for Live Aid. Led Zeppelin got back together for Live Aid. Could an invitation from his friend Bob Geldof to do Live Aid in 85, could that have helped? Philip ends up passing away on January 4th of 1986 from battle with pneumonia and heart failure. That was brought on by drug use. This statue is erected in Dublin on outside the Bruxelles pub on Harry Street, which is the pub that he was fired by Bruce Shields from Skid Row. And this is not the Skid Row from the 90s, by the way. You know, again, go back and listen to the Black Rose album. Listen to Jailbreak. You know, again, this band in the United States is famous for that one song and Dancing in the Moonlight. You know, Boys Are Back in Town is an example of how great they are, how hooky that song is, how intelligent the lyrics are. But go back and listen to Emerald. Go back and listen to the album Fighting. Go back and listen to the last Brian Robertson album, Bad Reputation. He does have a solo band called Grand Slam that has some good material that never really amounted to much. I'm going to celebrate his life with a little whiskey in a jar. Listen to Phil Lynott. Subscribe to my channel. You know, we're going to do this. We're going to talk about guys that were marginalized, guys that didn't quite make it, but that are great. Thin Lizzy influenced every heavy band and melodic rock band that came after them. Here's to you, Phil. You were the man. You were absolutely the man. Peace out. Have a good night, guys.